The woman on the phone said she hoped she had the right number. She said her name was Anna. She said she and her husband had just moved into a house on Birchwood Lane. I knew that address. I had known it since I was 4 years old. It was the house I had grown up in. The house my parents had sold 6 weeks earlier, without telling me. Anna said they had been doing some minor renovation work, removing an old skirting board in the back bedroom. And behind it, tucked into the wall cavity, like a secret that had been waiting patiently for 25 years, they had found a small tin. She said there was a note inside, a child's handwriting,
And a name.
She said she had tracked me down because she thought it should go back to the person it belonged to. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, and I could not speak for a moment. Not because of the tin.
Not yet.
Because Anna, a woman I had never met, who owed me absolutely nothing, had gone out of her way to find me. And my own parents hadn't thought to mention they were selling the house at all. But to understand why that call broke something open in me, you need to know how long I had been holding it together. I've spent most of my adult life being someone who is easy to overlook. Not invisible. Not unimportant. Just easy. Easy to not consult. Easy to inform after the fact. Easy to assume we'll be fine with whatever has already been decided. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it is the most accurate description I have of how I have moved through my family for as long as I can remember. I am the older child, the quiet one, the one who went to university and got a teaching job and moved into a small flat an hour away and built a life that was entirely functional and entirely her own and required very little from anyone else. My parents are David and Helen. They are not bad people. I want to say that clearly and mean it because it is true. They are practical and efficient, and they love me in the way that practical, efficient people love, steadily without a lot of visible texture, in a way that shows up more in actions than in words. They remembered my birthday. They came to my graduation. They called on Sunday evenings for years with a reliable rotation of questions about work and health and whether I was eating properly. They were present. They were just not particularly interested in my inner life. And they were not especially interested in including me in decisions. That had always been the particular quality of our relationship. Decisions happened.
And then I was told about them.
My brother Daniel is 3 years younger than me. He still lives in the same town we grew up in, 20 minutes from our parents' house. From the house, I should say now, because it is no longer their house. But I'll get to that. Daniel and my parents have always had a different kind of relationship than the one I have with them. Easier in some ways. More textured. He was around for things I missed because I had moved away. Sunday dinners and impromptu visits, and the gradual accumulation of small shared moments that builds a particular kind of closeness.
I didn't resent that.
Distance is a choice I made, and I made it deliberately. I needed space from that town and from the particular smallness of the life it had always seemed to expect from me. Teaching had been the right choice for exactly that reason. I was good at it. I am good at it. There is something about standing in front of a room full of young people who are trying to make sense of language and story, and the way words can hold the weight of an entire life, that has always felt important to me. More important than anything I might have stayed for. I taught English at a secondary school about an hour from where I grew up. I had been there for 8 years. I had a flat that I had made genuinely mine over time. Books on every surface. Plants on the windowsill. A particular armchair by the window that I had bought secondhand and recovered myself, and that was the single most comfortable piece of furniture I had ever owned. My life was quiet and full in the way that suits me. The house on Birchwood Lane had always been there in the background of it. Not a presence I thought about consciously. More like a fixed point. The place that existed at the center of everything that had made me who I was. I grew up there from the age of 4. I knew every corner of it with the particular intimacy that only childhood gives you. The bedroom with the sloped ceiling that I had always loved and Daniel had always complained about. The third stair that creaked if you stepped on the left side of it. The garden my mother had planted and replanted over 20 years until it looked exactly the way she wanted it to look. The smell of the hallway in winter. cold and familiar, and entirely specific to that house. I had not lived there since I was 18, but it had never occurred to me that it would not always exist, that there would not always be the possibility of going back to it, of standing in the kitchen where I had done my homework and eaten 1,000 breakfasts and had the first serious conversation I could remember having with my father. That possibility had always been there quietly in the background of everything, like a door I wasn't using but knew was there. My parents were in their late 60s when they sold it. The decision, as I later understood it, had been building for about a year. The house was too large for two people. The garden had become more work than my mother wanted. The stairs were starting to feel like a daily negotiation. They had found a bungalow on the other side of town. Single story, manageable garden. Everything on one level. Sensible. Practical. Exactly the kind of decision David and Helen would make and execute cleanly and efficiently without a great deal of sentimentality about it. The sale had completed on a Tuesday in early March. I found out on the Thursday, not because they called me, but because I happened to ring my mother that evening for our usual Sunday call, which I had moved to Thursday that week because of a school event. She mentioned it in the middle of a sentence about something else. "Oh, we got the keys to the bungalow Tuesday," she said. The move went very smoothly. I held the phone against my ear, and I said, "Oh." I said, "That's good." I said I hoped the move wasn't too tiring. And then we talked for another 20 minutes about things I cannot now remember. And when I got off the phone, I sat in my armchair by the window, and I looked out at the street below. And I felt something I didn't have a name for yet. Not quite grief. Not quite anger. Something in between. Something that had no edges yet because I hadn't let myself press on it. I filed it away the way I filed most things my parents did that cost me something. Neatly. Without ceremony. And I got on with my week. I was very good at getting on with things. I had been getting on with things for as long as I could remember. What I did not know was that 6 weeks later a woman named Anna would call me from a number I didn't recognize. And everything I had filed away so neatly would come open at once. Anna called on a Wednesday evening in late April. I was marking essays at my kitchen table. Red pen, stack of papers, cold cup of tea beside me that I kept forgetting to drink. The kind of ordinary evening that has no idea it is about to become something else. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. I almost didn't. I was in the middle of a particularly tangled argument about of mice and men from a student who had clearly strong feelings and very little evidence. But something made me pick up. She introduced herself carefully. Said her name was Anna. Said she hoped she had the right person. Said she and her husband had recently moved into a house on Birchwood Lane. I put my red pen down. She said they had been doing some minor work on the back bedroom. Nothing structural. Just updating some of the skirting boards. Old ones, she said. The kind that had clearly been there for decades. Her husband had been removing a section near the window when the board came away and revealed a small gap in the wall cavity behind it. And inside that gap was a tin. Small, she said. The kind that might once have held sweets or buttons or thread. Pale blue with a pattern on the lid that had mostly worn away. She said they had opened it because they didn't know what it was. And inside they had found 3 things. A folded piece of paper. A photograph. And a small brown button. She said the paper was a note, written in a child's handwriting, and at the top of the note was a name. My name. I sat very still at my kitchen table with the stack of unmarked essays in front of me and the cold cup of tea beside me, and I felt something move through me that I cannot precisely describe. Like a current. Like something that had been waiting a very long time to arrive. Asked her what the note said. She read it to me. It said my name and my age at the time, 9 years old, and the date, which was late autumn, nearly 26 years ago. And then it said, in the careful, deliberate handwriting of a 9-year-old who is taking this seriously, "This is my room, and I live here, and I am happy." I did not cry. Not then. But I felt something crack very quietly somewhere deep in my chest. The way old wood sounds when the temperature changes. Not breaking. Just shifting. Anna said she had tried to find me through the forwarding details the previous owners had left with the estate agent. My parents had left a forwarding address for post, but not a phone number. She had done some additional searching, LinkedIn, a school website where my name appeared in a staff list, and had eventually found a contact number she thought might be mine. She said she was sorry if she had overstepped. She said she just thought it should go back to the person it belonged to. I told her she had not overstepped. Not even slightly. My voice was steadier than I expected it to be. We talked for a few more minutes. She was warm and careful in the way of someone who understands that they are handling something delicate without quite knowing what it is. She asked if I would like to come and collect it. I said yes. She said to take my time, that there was no rush, that it would be there whenever I was ready. I thanked her. We said goodbye. I put the phone down on the table beside the essays and the red pen and the cold tea, and I sat there for a long time, thinking about a 9-year-old girl in a bedroom with a sloped ceiling, who had found a tin somewhere, who had written her name and her age and the date with great seriousness, who had folded the note and placed it alongside a photograph and a button she had loved, and had pushed it into the wall of her room like a message, like a small, private claim. This is my room, and I live here, and I am happy. I thought about what it meant that I had done that I had, at 9 years old, felt the need to leave something of myself behind in the walls of that house. Like I had known, in some wordless way, that things don't stay, that you have to press something into the permanent places while you can. And then I thought about the fact that the house had been sold 6 weeks ago, without a phone call, without a conversation, without anyone thinking to say, there is a house that was the center of your entire childhood, and we're going to sell it, and we thought you should know. I had been informed on a Thursday evening in the middle of a sentence about something else. After the fact, after the keys had changed hands, after the door I had always known there had already been closed and handed to someone else. I sat with that for a long time. And for the first time since the Thursday evening phone call, when my mother had mentioned it so casually, I let myself feel it. Not the managed, contained version. The real version. The one with edges. It hurt in a way I had not allowed it to hurt before. And underneath the hurt was something else. Something quieter and more persistent. A question I had been not asking for a very long time. At what point does accepting the way things are become the same thing as saying the way things are is acceptable? I didn't have an answer yet, but I was done filing it away. That much I knew. I picked up my phone again, and this time I did not call Anna. I called Daniel. Daniel answered on the third ring. He sounded relaxed. Background noise behind him. Television. Something low and familiar. The sound of a Wednesday evening that had not been interrupted yet. I said his name. He said, "Hey, everything okay?" The way people say it when they are not particularly expecting the answer to be no. I said, I had just had a phone call. I told him about Anna, about the house on Birchwood Lane, about the skirting board and the tin, and the note in a 9-year-old's handwriting. He was quiet while I talked, a different kind of quiet from his opening, more careful. When I finished, he said, "That's really something. That's really strange and lovely," he said. I said yes. And then I said, "Did you know?" He didn't answer immediately. That pause. I have replayed it many times since. It was not the pause of someone who doesn't understand the question. It was the pause of someone who does understand it and is deciding how to answer. He said they had mentioned it, that they had been thinking about it for a while, that it had seemed like a practical decision. I said, "Daniel, did you know before it happened?" He said yes. One word. Quiet. The kind of yes that knows it is the wrong answer and says itself anyway because there is no other honest option left. I asked him how long he had known. He said a few months. I asked him why he hadn't told me. He said he hadn't thought it was his place, that it was Mom and Dad's house and Mom and Dad's decision, and he hadn't wanted to get involved in something that wasn't his to tell. I listened to that. I turned it over carefully. Not his place. Not his to tell. His older sister, an hour away, going about her life with no idea that the house she grew up in was being sold and signed over to strangers. And his position was that informing me was not his place. I told him I understood. I said it quietly, and I meant it in the precise way it was intended. Not I forgive you. Not it's fine. Just I understand. Meaning I now understand exactly what happened and exactly what everyone's choices were. We got off the phone shortly after. I sat with what he had said for a long time. The not his place of it. The way it had been delivered. Not with guilt exactly. With the particular mild discomfort of someone who had made a choice they knew was questionable and had found a framing for it that let them live with it comfortably. I knew that framing well. I had grown up inside a family that was very good at framing, at finding the practical, reasonable explanation for why things happened the way they happened, at presenting decisions as simply the natural outcome of circumstance rather than choices that someone had made and others had been excluded from. I went to bed that night without calling my parents. Not because I wasn't ready to talk to them, but because I wanted to be very clear in my own mind first, about what I wanted to say, about what I needed them to hear, about the difference between the conversation I could have in the heat of that Wednesday evening and the one that would actually matter. I lay in the dark and I thought about the house, the sloped ceiling in my bedroom that I had loved, the third stair, the garden, the hallway smell. I thought about all the years I had carried those things without knowing I was carrying them. The way the house had existed as a quiet constant in the background of a life that had taken me far from it. The way I had never needed to go back very often because it was enough to know it was there. And then I thought about a 9-year-old pressing a tin into the wall of her bedroom, writing her name, her age,
The date.
"This is my room, and I live here, and I am happy." What had she been doing? She had been making herself real in that place, pressing herself into the permanent structure of it, saying I was here, not just passing through, actually here. And now a woman she had never met had found that small declaration and tracked her down across 25 years to return it, while the people who should have told her the house was being sold had mentioned it in the middle of a sentence about something else. After the fact, I called my mother the next morning, early, before school, before I had time to talk myself into a softer version of what I needed to say. She answered brightly, the Sunday call voice, warm and efficient, and ready to rotate through the usual questions. I did not let her get to the questions. I said, "Mum, I need to talk to you about the house." A beat of silence. Then she said, "Oh?" In the way she said "oh" when she was not sure where something was going but was preparing to manage it. I told her about Anna, about the call, about the tin. She said, "Oh, how lovely. How strange and lovely." I said, "Mum, why didn't you tell me you were selling it?" She said, "We did tell you." I said, "You told me after the sale had completed, in the middle of a phone call about something else." She said, "Well, it happened quite quickly in the end. These things move fast once they get going." I said the decision to sell had been building for a year. Daniel had known for months. She was quiet. I said, "I am not asking you to have consulted me. I understand it was your house and your decision. I am asking why you didn't think I would want to know. Why you didn't think I might have wanted the chance to say goodbye to it properly. To walk through it one last time knowing it was the last time. To have that rather than finding out it was gone on a Thursday evening when you mentioned it between two other things." My mother said she hadn't wanted to make a fuss. She said she knew I was busy. She said she thought I had moved on from all of that. I sat with that phrase for a moment. Moved on from all of that. As though a childhood was something you completed and filed away. As though the house where I had become whoever I was just a structure. Bricks and a roof. Something you moved on from. I told her quietly and clearly that I had not moved on from all of that. That I didn't think that was how people worked. That I thought she knew that and had found it more convenient to assume otherwise. She didn't say anything for a moment. And in that silence I heard something I had not heard from my mother very often. Not defense. Not redirection. Just the sound of someone sitting with something they knew was true. The call with my mother ended without resolution.
Not badly.
Not with raised voices or things said that couldn't be unsaid. Just without the clean ending that part of me had hoped for.
She said she was sorry I felt that way.
Which is not the same as being sorry. I have always known the difference. She said she would talk to my father. That they hadn't meant to hurt me. That they had just been trying to keep things simple. I said I knew that. I said that was actually part of what I was trying to explain. That keeping things simple had always meant keeping me at a distance from things that were mine to be part of. She went quiet again. That same quality of silence. The one that wasn't defense. I left it there. There was no point pressing further that morning. I had said the true things. She had heard them. What she did with them was not something I could control. I went to school. I taught 4 classes. I marked a set of papers during my free period and ate lunch in the staff room and talked to my colleague Janet about a student we were both concerned about. I was entirely present for all of it. That is the thing about having a job that demands your full attention. It doesn't leave a lot of room for the other things to take over, which can be a mercy. My father called that evening. He didn't call often. Phone calls were more my mother's territory. My father expressed things in other ways. In showing up, in doing, in the quiet physical presence that had always been his particular language. So when his name appeared on my screen, I felt something shift slightly. He said hello. I said hello. And then there was a pause in which I could feel him choosing his words the way he always chose them.
Slowly.
With the care of a man who did not speak often and knew that because of that his words carried a particular weight when he did. He said, "Your mother told me about the phone call this morning." I said yes. He said he was sorry.
Just that. I'm sorry.
Not "I'm sorry you feel that way." Not "I'm sorry if it came across wrong." Just "I'm sorry." 2 words, plain and unqualified, in my father's voice. I felt something move in my chest. Not quite forgiveness.
Not yet.
But something adjacent to it. The beginning of the territory where forgiveness eventually lives. I told him about Anna.
About the tin.
About the note. He was quiet while I described it. And when I got to the part about what the note said, "This is my room, and I live here, and I am happy," I heard something on the other end of the line that I had not heard in a very long time. My father, not quite holding himself together. He didn't cry. That is not a thing my father does. But there was a quality to his silence that told me he was somewhere close to it. He said he remembered that coat. The one the button had come from. He said it was red with big buttons and you wore it everywhere for 2 years, and then one day it was too small and you were devastated. I had not remembered that. But the moment he said it, I did. The red coat. The big buttons. The specific grief of being 9 years old and outgrowing something you loved. I must have kept one. Pressed it into the tin along with everything else. Along with my name and my age and my small declaration that I was there and I was happy. I sat with my father on the phone for a while after that, not talking about the house sale, not talking about what had gone wrong or who had known what and when, just talking about the coat, about the house, about things I remembered and things he remembered, and the way memory is never quite the same between 2 people even when they were in the same rooms. It was the most real conversation I had had with my father in years, maybe longer, and it had taken a woman named Anna and a pale blue tin and a note in a child's handwriting to get us there. I thought about that afterward, about how sometimes the thing that opens a door is not the thing you would have chosen. Not the carefully prepared conversation or the right moment or the right words assembled in the right order. Sometimes it is a button, and a photograph, and a child who pressed her happiness into the wall of a house because she wanted it to last. I called Anna 2 days later. I told her I would like to come and collect the tin if that was still all right. She said of course. She said to come whenever suited me. She asked if I would like to come in and look around. She said she understood if that felt like too much, but that the offer was there. I thought about it for a moment, the idea of walking back into those rooms, seeing them with someone else's furniture and someone else's choices and someone else's life already beginning to layer itself over the top of everything I remembered. It could be painful. I knew that. But I also knew that the alternative, never going back, never seeing it again, having the last version of that house in my memory be the one I had carried away at 18 without knowing it was the last time, felt worse. I wanted to say goodbye properly. I had not been given the chance to do it before the sale, but I could do it now. I said yes. I said I would love to come in. And I thanked her again for finding me. She said it was nothing. I told her it was not nothing. Not even slightly. She seemed to understand that I meant it. We arranged a Saturday morning 3 weeks away. Enough time for me to be ready. Enough time to finish the conversation I had started with my parents and see where it landed. Enough time to sit with everything that had opened up in the last week and let it settle into something I could carry properly. I put the phone down and looked out of my window at the street below. The same street I had looked at the night my mother told me the house was gone. It looked the same. Everything outside looked exactly the same. But something inside had shifted so fundamentally that I could barely find the shape of the person I had been before Anna called. I was not sure yet if that was frightening or necessary. I was starting to think it might be both. The Saturday morning Anna had suggested arrived quickly, the way significant days sometimes do, as though they have been waiting just around the corner, and you turn, and there they are. I drove the hour to my hometown on roads I knew so well I barely had to think about them. Past the retail park that hadn't been there when I was a child. Past the turn from my old secondary school. Past the church with a lopsided gate that had been lopsided for as long as anyone could remember. The town looked the same and smaller. The way hometowns always do when you come back to them as an adult. Like someone has quietly reduced the scale of everything while you weren't watching. I turned onto Birchwood Lane at just after 10 in the morning. I had not been on this street in over 2 years. I had not had a reason to be. My parents had still lived here then, and I had not been visiting enough. I understood that now more fully than I had before. The house looked the same from the outside. That was the first thing I noticed. Same red brick. Same front gate. Same path to the door. Anna had put a pot of something flowering on the front step that had not been there before. Small and cheerful and entirely hers. I sat in the car for a moment before I got out. Not because I wasn't ready, just because I wanted a second to acknowledge what I was about to do. To walk back into the place that had made me. To see it belonging to someone else. To say goodbye to it in the way I should have been given the chance to do before it stopped being ours. I got out of the car. Anna opened the door before I reached it. She was younger than I had imagined from her voice. Late 20s maybe. Warm eyes and an open face and the slightly careful expression of someone who understood that this visit was significant and was trying to hold space for that without making it heavier than it needed to be. She shook my hand and said it was really good to meet me. I said the same and meant it completely. She brought me inside. The hallway. The smell was different. That was the first thing. The particular winter smell I had carried in my memory for years was gone, of course. It was spring now, and this was someone else's home, and it smelled like fresh paint and cut flowers and the specific new smell of a house that is being made into something. But the proportions were the same. The light from the window above the door fell at the same angle. The staircase rose in front of me the same way it always had. I looked at the third stair automatically, stepped to the right of it without thinking, and then stopped and laughed. A short, surprised laugh that came out before I could decide whether it was appropriate. Anna looked at me. I said, "I'm sorry." I said, "The third stair creaks if you step on the left side. I have been avoiding it since I was about 6 years old." Her face broke into a smile. She said, "Oh my goodness." She said she had been wondering why it did that. And just like that, the heaviness of the morning lifted slightly, became something more bearable. She took me through the rooms one by one. The living room where her furniture was arranged differently from how my parents had always had it, but the fireplace was the same. The kitchen where she had painted the cabinets a soft off-white that was actually an improvement. The garden which my mother had left immaculate, and which Anna was clearly trying to maintain with a slightly panicked energy of someone who had inherited more flower beds than they had experience for. I told her the roses along the back fence needed cutting back in late autumn, that the lavender by the side gate was tougher than it looked and would survive almost anything. She wrote it down on her phone with an earnestness that I found genuinely touching. And then she took me upstairs. The bedroom with the sloped ceiling. She had made it a study. A desk under the window, bookshelves along the straight wall, a small lamp that cast warm light in the corner. It was lovely, different and lovely. I stood in the doorway and looked at it. The slope of the ceiling exactly as I remembered. The window that looked out over the back garden. The place on the wall near the skirting board where the board had been replaced. Fresh wood, slightly lighter than the surrounding boards. The mark of what had been found there. I walked in, stood in the middle of the room that had been mine for 14 years. The room where I had done my homework and read by torchlight under the covers and cried over things that mattered enormously at the time and written in diaries I later burned, and looked out the window at the garden below and felt all the enormous ordinary feelings of a childhood happening in real time. I stood there for a moment, and I said goodbye to it. Not out loud. Internally. Completely and properly. The way I should have been allowed to do before the sale. Anna had left me alone without being asked. She had gone back downstairs and left me to have whatever I needed to have in that room. I was grateful for that in a way I didn't have words for. She came back up after a few minutes with the tin. She placed it in my hands carefully. Pale blue, the pattern worn away, lighter than I expected. I opened it. The note first. My own handwriting from 25 years ago. Careful and deliberate and entirely serious. My name. My age.
The date.
This is my room, and I live here, and I am happy. The photograph.
My father and me in the back garden.
Summer from the look of it. He was crouching down to my level. I was laughing at something. His face was turned toward me with an expression I recognized now as an adult in a way I could not have recognized as a child. Pure, uncomplicated love. The kind that doesn't require anything back. The button. Brown, small for holes. The red coat. I held all three things in my hands in the room where I had left them. And something in me that had been open and raw since Anna's first phone call closed gently. Not shut. Just settled. Like a question that had finally heard its answer. I went downstairs and sat in Anna's kitchen, and we had tea and talked for an hour. About the house and the town, and her plans for the garden. About teaching and about books and about the strange ways that life connects people who have no reason to know each other. She was exactly the kind of person you hope the places you love will be passed to. Someone who would look after it. Someone who would care. I drove home with the tin on the passenger seat, and I thought about the Saturday that had just passed, and I felt something I had not expected to feel quite so soon. Ready. The week after I visited the house, I had dinner with my parents. Not at the bungalow. Neutral ground. A restaurant in town that we had been going to for years. The kind of place that feels safe because it is familiar and public and nobody raises their voice in a room like that. I had suggested it. My father had agreed immediately. My mother had taken a beat and then agreed too. That beat told me she knew this was not a usual dinner. We sat at a table near the window, ordered the things we always ordered, talked about small things for a while the way you do when you are circling something larger. The bungalow settling in. A neighbor of theirs. Something Daniel had said at the weekend. And then my father put his menu down even though he had already ordered, and he looked at me. And he said we should have told you.
Just like that.
No preamble. No qualification. We should have told you. My mother looked at the table. I said, I know you know that. I said I'm not here to make you feel worse about it than you already do. I'm here because I need to say some things that I should have said a long time ago, and this felt like the right moment. My father nodded. My mother looked up. I said what I had been preparing to say. Not a speech. I had deliberately not prepared a speech because speeches become performances, and I did not want to perform. I just said the true things. I said that the house sale was not an isolated thing for me, that it had landed the way it landed because it was the largest version of a pattern I had been absorbing for most of my adult life. The pattern of being informed rather than included, of decisions being made and then presented to me as settled facts, of my distance from home being used as a reason to keep me at a distance from things that mattered. I said I understood that they had not done any of it deliberately, that I did not believe they had sat down and decided to exclude me. I believed it was something subtler and more habitual than that, a way of operating that had calcified over years without anyone examining it. But I said that the effect of it was the same regardless of the intention, that I had spent years feeling like a peripheral member of my own family, informed, managed, kept comfortable, but not really consulted, not really included, not really known. My mother said she hadn't realized. Her voice was different from the defensive one she had used on the phone. This one was quieter, more genuinely uncertain. She said she thought I had always been so independent, so self-sufficient, that she had sometimes worried that she was imposing when she called, that she hadn't wanted to crowd me. I sat with that for a moment, because I recognized it as true, not as an excuse, but as a true thing that had existed alongside all the other true things. I had been self-sufficient. I had moved away and built a life and required very little from them practically, and they had read that over years as not needing to be included, as having moved on from the family in some fundamental way, when what it had actually been was a woman making her own life while still wanting, still needing to be part of theirs. Those two things are not contradictory.
I told them that.
I said being independent does not mean not wanting to belong. That building my own life had never meant I wanted to be excluded from ours. That I had always wanted to be part of things. I had just stopped expecting to be. My father reached across the table and put his hand over mine. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I let him keep his hand there. The food arrived, and we ate. And somewhere in the middle of that dinner, something shifted between the three of us. Not dramatically. Not with the clean resolution of a story that has been neatly tied, but with the particular shift that happens when people have finally said the true things to each other and are now sitting in the same room with all of it visible between them. It was uncomfortable, and it was the most honest meal I had ever had with my parents. In the weeks that followed, things changed in small but real ways. My mother called more, not with the rotation of practical questions, with actual things she wanted to tell me. A funny thing that had happened, something she had read, a memory that had surfaced about the house that she thought I might want. My father sent me a photograph. He had found it while unpacking boxes at the bungalow. The two of us in the back garden. Summer. He was crouching down to my level. I was laughing. Not the same photograph as the one in the tin. A different summer. A different moment. But the same expression on his face. I put both photographs on my desk, side by side. The one Anna had found, and the one my father had sent. Two moments from the same garden. Two versions of a same love. I looked at them most mornings when I sat down to work. Not in grief. In something quieter and more sustaining than grief. Daniel called about a month after the dinner. He said he had been thinking about what I had said. About not his place. About the choice he had made. He said he thought he had been a coward. Not careless. Not thoughtless. A coward. He said he had known it would hurt me, and he had found a framing that let him stay comfortable. And that he was sorry. I appreciated the precision of that. The willingness to call it what it actually was. I told him I accepted it. And I meant that. Acceptance is not the same as forgetting. But it is the beginning of the road that eventually leads somewhere better. I still have the tin. It sits on my bookshelf between a novel I love and a plant that has been thriving for 2 years now. Pale blue, the pattern mostly worn away. Sometimes I open it. Not often. Just occasionally. I look at the note and the photograph and the small brown button. I think about the 9-year-old who made it, who had understood in some wordless way, that the things we love do not last forever, and that the answer to that is not to love them less. The answer is to press yourself into them while you can. To say I was here. I lived here. I was happy. I think she was onto something. I think about Anna sometimes. About the choice she made to track me down. She could have kept the tin or thrown it away or simply left it on a shelf and thought nothing more of it. Instead, she spent time finding a stranger. Because she thought something that belonged to someone should go back to them. I think about what that cost her. A few hours, maybe. Some searching. A slightly awkward phone call to a number she wasn't certain was right. Small things. And yet the effect of those small things on my life was enormous. It unlocked a grief I had been managing. It opened a conversation I had been avoiding. It gave me back a goodbye I had been denied. It started the slow, imperfect, real process of my family becoming more honest with each other. All of that, from a woman who owed me nothing choosing to do something kind. I think about that when I am tempted to decide that small gestures don't matter. That the effort of doing the considered thing is more than it's worth. They matter. They matter enormously. You just don't always get to see how. Some things end before you are ready. Some doors close before you get the chance to stand in them one last time and feel them properly. That is a real loss and it deserves to be named. But sometimes the walls hold something back for you. Something you left there without knowing you were leaving it. A small declaration from a version of yourself that knew something the adult version had forgotten. That being here matters. That being happy matters. That you were always worth remembering. If this story stayed with you, if there is something in your own life you have been filing away neatly instead of feeling properly, I hope it reminded you that it is not too late to stop. To say the true things. To let the walls give something back. Share this if it meant something to you. And come back for the next one. We will be here.